Gold Thread Studios. Mango Hill Police Station. Episode 2. The Wedding That Ended in Handcuffs. At 9:23 on Saturday morning, a bride walked into Mango Hill Police Station and asked Sergeant Marva Sinclair whether a man could marry two women at the same time. Marva looked at the white dress, then at the veil, then at the bouquet of yellow roses trembling slightly in the bride's hands. Not legally. The bride nodded. That is what I thought. Constable Kemar Johnson stopped writing in the station diary. Constable Shanice Campbell slowly placed her coffee on the desk. Outside, the rural district shimmered beneath the morning sun. A decorated church stood half a mile away, its yard filled with white ribbons, folding chairs, and enough parked vehicles to announce that somebody intended to get married before lunchtime. The bride introduced herself as Althea Bennett. She was 33, taught grade 4 at Mango Hill Primary School, and had spent 11 months planning her wedding to Winston Clarke. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 37 minutes. Instead of preparing to walk down the aisle, Althea sat inside the police station with an envelope on her lap. This was pushed under the bridal room door, she explained. Inside the envelope was a certified copy of a marriage certificate. It showed that Winston Clarke had married Maureen Graham 14 years earlier in Mandeville. There was also a short handwritten message. Ask him to show you the divorce. Althea had telephoned Winston immediately. He assured her the marriage had ended years ago. The paperwork, he said, was somewhere safe. When she asked where, he became angry. That was when Althea removed herself from the church, walked to the police station, and decided she wanted answers before vows. Sergeant Marva studied the certificate. Did Winston ever tell you he had been married? He said he had one serious relationship when he was younger. He never called it a marriage. Do you know this Maureen Graham? No. Did you tell anybody you were coming here? Althea shook her head. I left through the side gate. Everybody was busy arguing about where to put the cake. Kemar glanced toward the window. Somebody will notice the bride missing soon. They noticed 3 minutes later. The peaceful Saturday morning ended beneath the combined arrival of a decorated minibus, 2 private cars, 6 members of the wedding party, and Miss Pearl Hilton's cookshop van. The station yard filled with people wearing lavender dresses, cream suits, church hats, and expressions of complete disaster. Winston Clarke entered first. He was 38, broad-shouldered, carefully groomed, and dressed in a cream suit that had clearly cost more than the police station's monthly stationery budget. Officer, somebody kidnapped my bride. Althea stepped out of the interview room. Nobody kidnapped me. Winston froze. The wedding party froze. Miss Pearl looked from the bride to the groom. Good. Because I have 12 trays of food at that church, and kidnapping was not included in the catering price. Sister Cynthia Blake came through the doorway behind her, still wearing the broad mustard yellow hat from the previous week. She stared at Althea. You couldn't tell anybody you were leaving? I needed to think. People have been searching the baptismal pool. Sergeant Marva raised one hand. This is now a police inquiry. Everybody who is not directly involved needs to wait outside. Nobody moved. Marva looked at Kemar. Clear the station. Kemar guided the bridesmaids, groomsmen, 2 aunties, 1 flower girl, and a man carrying a video camera onto the veranda. Miss Pearl attempted to remain. Outside, Miss Pearl. I am directly involved. I cook the rice. Outside. Miss Pearl left reluctantly but positioned herself beside the open window. Winston approached Althea. Baby, this is a misunderstanding. Are you still married to Maureen Graham? No. Show me the divorce papers. They're at home. Sergeant Marva watched him closely. Where's home? Santa Cruz. Can somebody collect them? Winston hesitated. The house is locked. Do you have the key? My cousin has it. Where is your cousin? Montego Bay. Shanice lifted an eyebrow. Althea did not blink. Winston lowered his voice. Why are you embarrassing me like this? I am wearing a wedding dress inside a police station because you may already have a wife. Embarrassment is not our biggest problem. Sergeant Marva separated them. She asked Winston for identification and began taking a formal statement. Winston insisted that his first marriage had ended 8 years earlier. He claimed a lawyer in Mandeville handled the divorce, although he could not remember the lawyer's full name. Mr. Brown, he said. First name? Something beginning with D. Office address? Near the market. Telephone number? I changed my phone. The more questions Marva asked, the less information Winston remembered. Shanice examined the certified marriage record. It had been issued only 4 days earlier. Somebody had known exactly what to request and when to deliver it. Althea's wedding had not been a secret. Photographs of the engagement decorated the church notice board, the supermarket entrance, and half the utility poles in Mango Hill. But only a few people knew where Althea would be dressing that morning. Shanice stepped onto the veranda. Who had access to the bridal room? Sister Cynthia began counting. The bridesmaids, Althea's mother, the photographer, Miss Pearl, myself, and Leon. Leon? The best man. He brought Winston's suit from Mandeville. Leon Pusey sat at the far end of the veranda in a lavender waistcoat. He was staring intensely at the road. When Shanice called his name, he nearly fell off the bench. Come inside. Leon followed her reluctantly. He claimed he knew nothing about the envelope. His left thumb, however, carried a fresh purple ink stain. The same purple ink appeared on the handwritten warning. Shanice placed the note on the desk. You want to try that answer again? Leon stared at the floor. Outside the window, Miss Pearl leaned closer. Sergeant Marva closed the shutters. Leon exhaled. He had known Winston since secondary school. He also knew Maureen. The marriage had not ended with a divorce. Winston and Maureen separated 6 years earlier after years of arguing. Maureen moved to Manchester to care for her mother. Winston moved back to St. Elizabeth and began telling people he was single. When Winston became engaged to Althea, Leon repeatedly urged him to settle the first marriage properly. Winston promised he would. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, Leon discovered that nothing had been filed. So you warned Althea? Marva asked. I didn't know what else to do. Winston wouldn't listen. Where did you get the marriage certificate? Maureen. Althea sat straighter. She knows about the wedding? She does now. Leon had telephoned Maureen the previous week. She obtained the certified record and sent it to him. That morning, Leon slipped the envelope beneath the bridal room door. Where's Maureen now? Shanice asked. Leon looked toward Winston. On her way here. The announcement produced the first honest expression Winston had shown all morning. Fear. He stood. I'm leaving. You are in the middle of giving a statement, Marva said. I haven't committed any crime. That is what we are trying to establish. Winston moved toward the door. Kemar blocked it without touching him. Best you sit down, sir. Winston's hand went inside his suit jacket. 3 officers immediately became alert. He withdrew a folded document. Here, he snapped. This is the divorce paper. The document had an official-looking border, a gold seal, 2 signatures, and enough decorative lettering to impress anybody who did not read it carefully. Shanice read it carefully. The first problem was that Winston's middle name was wrong. The second was that Maureen's surname had been misspelled. The third was the word dissolution. It appeared 3 times. It was spelled differently every time. Sergeant Marva held the document up to the light. Who gave you this? My lawyer. Mr. Brown? Yes. The one whose first name, address, and telephone number you cannot remember? Winston said nothing. Marva placed the paper inside an evidence sleeve. Until its authenticity could be verified, Winston would not be returning to Providence Deliverance Chapel to marry anybody. The station telephone rang. Everyone looked at it. Since Sister Cynthia's intervention, the landline had been repaired and was now answered before the second ring. Kemar picked up. After listening for several seconds, he handed the receiver to Marva. It was the marriage officer waiting at the church. He wanted to know whether the ceremony should proceed. No, Marva said. It should not. A cry rose from outside. Miss Pearl had received the news through the open window at the back of the station. What am I supposed to do with 12 trays of food? Miss Pearl, Marva called. I am only asking a practical question. A taxi entered the yard. A tall black woman in a navy blue dress stepped out carrying a brown document folder. Maureen Graham was 41, composed, and visibly tired of Winston Clarke. Althea stood when she entered. For a few seconds, the two women simply looked at one another. Then Maureen handed the folder to Sergeant Marva. Inside were the original marriage certificate, correspondence from a lawyer, and letters sent to Winston during the previous 2 years requesting his cooperation with a formal divorce. He had ignored everyone. 2 years requesting his cooperation with a formal divorce. I didn't know about Althea until Leon called, Maureen explained. She deserves the truth. Winston's charm disappeared. He accused Maureen of jealousy. He accused Leon of betrayal. He accused Althea of overreacting. Finally, he accused the police of ruining his wedding. Sergeant Marva remained quiet until he finished. Mr. Clarke, the police did not marry your first wife. We did not propose to the second one. And we did not bring a document into this station with dissolution spelled 3 different ways. Outside, somebody laughed. The shutters were still closed, but Miss Pearl had found the back door. Winston made one final attempt to leave. He pushed past Kemar, reached the station steps, and discovered that Shanice had already moved between him and the gate. He stopped. Half the wedding party watched from the veranda. Miss Pearl stood beside her van holding a large serving spoon. Sister Cynthia folded her arms. Maureen remained beside Althea. Winston looked at the road, then at Shanice, then at Kemar approaching behind him. The calculation lasted less than 3 seconds. He raised his hands. Kemar secured the handcuffs. Winston was detained while the officers contacted the appropriate investigators and began verifying the suspicious document. The wedding was officially canceled. Althea removed her veil but kept her dress on. She refused to leave through the back of the station or hide from the guests. I didn't do anything wrong, she said. Maureen nodded. No, you didn't. The 2 women walked back to the church together. By 1 o'clock, the reception had been renamed the Almost Wedding Lunch. Miss Pearl served every tray of food. Nobody asked for a refund. Even Sergeant Marva accepted a plate of rice and peas, baked chicken, and steamed vegetables when Sister Cynthia delivered it to the station. Leon apologized to Althea for waiting so long to tell her. She thanked him for telling her before the vows instead of after them. The wedding cake remained untouched until Miss Pearl decided that preventing waste was a form of community service. Winston spent the afternoon answering questions in a room without decorations. Near sunset, Sister Cynthia returned to the station carrying Althea's bouquet. She doesn't want it, she explained. Flowers still good. Marva looked up from her paperwork. What are we supposed to do with a wedding bouquet? Sister Cynthia shrugged. Find out who getting married next. She turned her back and tossed the bouquet over one shoulder. Shanice stepped aside. Marva remained seated. The flowers landed directly in Kemar's hands. The station became silent. Kemar stared at the yellow roses. Miss Pearl appeared in the doorway with the remaining wedding cake. She smiled. Well, look at that. Kemar placed the bouquet on the evidence counter. I just caught it. That doesn't mean anything. Sergeant Marva returned to her report. Put it in the property book. In Mango Hill, every object needed an explanation, especially when it entered a police station unexpectedly. End of episode 2.